Prestigious political science institute Sciences Po, and Marie Battini of human rights campaign group Info Birmanie France. Welcome back to all of you. David Camroux, you told us that your last time in Burma was in 2007. Looking at the report that we saw in part one, Marie Battini commenting on the disconnect between the city and the rural areas. Did you?
Well, there are a number of disconnects. There's a disconnect between Rangoon and now Naypyidaw and the rest of Burma, between the city and what's happening in the city and the rural areas. There is another disconnect between the majority Burmans and the ethnic minorities and their appreciation and their experience of what's happening. And there is a third kind of disconnect, I guess, of appreciation between the opposition within Burma and the opposition outside Burma. One gets the impression that the opposition within Burma, at least some elements of it, have decided to say, look, let's run with this. You know, here is an opening. Let's see what we can get out of it. Let's see how far it can be pushed. And whereas the opposition outside Burma, both amongst the Burmese diaspora and also amongst some of the advocacy groups, you know, and understandably tends to take a sort of a harder position. So, I mean, this is making the situation a little bit more difficult in terms of determining what the international community should do in this context.
And we'll get back to that point in a moment. Zoya Fan, I want to pick up on something you said just before the break. You expressed even skepticism as to what was going on inside of Burma. Now, when you see the hundreds of political prisoners that have been released the past couple of days, do you say to yourself, this could be for real, or is this for you? For you, this is just window dressing. I mean, there's been a lot of people released from prison.
Well, when I saw the news about the release of the political prisoners, of course, this is very good news. It is nice, amazing, because this is what people around the world and Burmese people have been campaigning for, and we've been asking for the release of all political prisoners. So far, in the recent release, we've seen almost 300 political prisoners being released, and almost 300 are the pro-democracy political prisoners. And again, when you look at the rest of the political prisoners released, according to the new government, the military-backed government, and actually around 300 are the pro-government people. For example, the former military spies and former military men who were imprisoned because of the internal argument. And again, when you look at those pro-democracy political prisoners who have been released, they've been released that they won't participate in any political activities in the future in that conditions. And again, these political prisoners who have been released from the democracy movement side, and they made it very clear, they were happy they were released, but they are cautious, and they call for the release of all the remaining pro-democracy political prisoners.
And why do you think, Zoya Fan, why do you think this is happening now?
Well, for many years, we know that the government in Burma, they want international legitimacy, and they want international pressure and sanctions to be lifted. They just want to present themselves as normal dictatorship, and that is what they did last year. They had the whole series of things that they did. They had elections in 2010, and these elections was sham election that brought in a constitution that legalized dictatorships rule within civilian guise. And these changes that we've seen in the past years, actually, this tackle the symptoms. It doesn't tackle the root causes of the problem, which is democratic reform. When you look at the initial ceasefire agreements with ethnic armed groups, with the Karen National Union, the Chin, and also the Shan, of course, it can be a positive step forward. But without political dialogue and without political solutions, it is unlikely and it is impossible to get a real democratic reform in Burma that guarantee equality, autonomy, security for the people in Burma.
So the substantive political dialogue still to come, you're saying. Let me ask you, Mary, first of all, are you surprised at the moves that there we saw Zoya Fan spell out the conditions under which Thein Sein became president, the general putting on civilian clothes in conditions that were contested the world over. Are you surprised by the moves he's been making the past couple of weeks?
Well, I think everybody's been surprised by the moves taken by President Thein Sein and his regime. When you consider the past 60 years that the military have been in power in Burma, no one could expect such a turn in the situation. But what's important now to think about is how far are those changes going to go, how deep? And that's the question raised by Zoya Pan. It's not a question of why things are happening now, because it's the top of the iceberg. Opposition has been working underground for 20 years. It's not something that was visible for the outside world, but the outside opposition in other countries was just an echo of what was happening inside. So for me, it's a result of pressure inside, supported by pressure outside. And the question now is how far is Thein Sein and his regime are willing and able to go?
So some people have compared this that he could turn into a Mikhail Gorbachev, a guy who realizes that it's just the old system's just no longer tenable.
There could be that element to it, but I mean it's unusual, perhaps unique for Burma, but it's not unusual in Southeast Asia that ex-generals become democrats. I mean, Indonesia is governed has a president who's an ex-general. Thailand has had experience of generals becoming democrats. So I mean, there are cases of this occurring. What we really, the regime behind the democratic government is opaque. One of my Burmese friends said, 1/3 of them are for reform, 1/3 of them are asleep, and the other third of them are waiting to see. So with this kind of opacity, we really can't measure how far these reforms will go. I'll add another element to this, which is the withdrawal of Than Shwe, the former military dictator. Is he still, as his predecessor Ne Win was the man behind the scene, the ghost, so to speak, at the feast? There's some evidence that Than Shwe is now spending a lot of time in monasteries and temples. He's built the monument to his immortality. He's built Naypyidaw, $3 to $4 billion US. He's got the symbol of his immortality. Perhaps, this is a theory, I have no evidence for this, perhaps there is a kind of withdrawal that he's now performing those meritorious acts. He's got a lot to make up for in the period of military.
And the fears there could be a coup?
Well, reform is not inevitable. Kim Nyunt, one of the people who's been released, was the head of the intelligence service. He was what was considered a moderate, and he was jailed in 2004 in these internal fights within the regime that have been talked about. The present civilian president, is also the head of the intelligence service. Now, the advantage of being the head of the intelligence service is you do actually know what's happening on the ground. So that makes me a little bit optimistic in a bizarre kind of way about the intentions of the present president. I think what is behoven on the international community is to be incredibly observant. And the media has an important role to play in this. These kind of reports where we not only just go to Rangoon, but throughout Burma, there is clearly, on the part of at least part of the regime, the desire to return to the international community. And this is a lever that the international community has on it. So it's in a position to kind of try and impose some conditions on that.
Let's look at the reaction now of the international community. 2 weeks ago, we saw the first visit by a UK foreign minister to Burma, which is, after all, a former British colony in more than half a century. William Hague's visit and overtures quickly followed by some of his counterparts. All right, we'll go to that a little bit later on. We can see that it was not just William Hague who traveled to Burma recently.
We love her. She's the only one who can change Burma.
Everybody love her. Everybody want her. Everybody need her for our country.
Citizens today in the streets of Rangoon to Aung San Suu Kyi going to register to vote. But let's stick to what we were saying about the foreign policy. We've seen the French foreign minister saying he's going to triple aid. We saw
humanitarian aid.
We saw Hillary Clinton, the U.S. Secretary of State, who's talking now about the exchange of ambassadors. The European Union is to consider at least a partial lifting of sanctions in days to come. Marie Bettini, is the international community easing up at the right pace, or are they going too fast?
Well, I think, once again, they need to be cautious, and a lifting of sanctions right now would probably be too premature. This transition has to be deepened before we can say that change is really occurring in Burma. So obviously there's a lot of opportunities for foreign investors to come into Burma, and that has to be reminded, because obviously these interests come into play when talking about lifting sanctions, and we need to be very cautious on how those investments should be undertaken in Burma. Aung San Suu Kyi has already expressed her opinion on the matter and has asked for transparency and accountability for people who want to come and invest in Burma, and she wants those investments to be for the people of Burma, for the interest of the people of Burma first and foremost. Obviously, people coming and investing money in Burma want to make money out of it, but we need to keep the interests of the people of Burma, the respect of the environment and social factors at the heart of such investments.
All right, I would say that the lifting of sanctions, yes, would be premature. I mean, sanctions are the only lever, or one of the only levers that Aung San Suu Kyi has. So it really must wait for a signal from her and from the opposition generally about sanctions. What I'm particularly concerned about is the absence of a European presence. I mean, the silence of Catherine Ashton is unacceptable. And
how do you explain that silence?
Various explanations to do with her position, which is an impossible one, has to do with the influence of the bigger countries in Europe who don't want a strong European voice. But also, I think, simply a failure to have a strong European presence. I personally would like to see the opening of a European delegation. There is going to be an opening of a representative office, which will depend on Bangkok, but I think this would be an occasion for the Europeans to be united in doing something proactive, as they were united in doing something, if you like, more punitive in the sanctions policy.
I want to pick up on that point and just show you that on the France 24 Debate Facebook page, some people expressing skepticism over the fact that in the space of 2 weeks you saw both the British and the French foreign minister travel to Burma. Gur says it's all about competition for resources by the major powers who are not happy with China's preferential access. Zoya Fan, your thoughts on this? Is this a quick rush for oil and gas, or again, as David Cameron was mentioning, are the Western powers, for the time being, still hedging their bets when it comes to completely lifting sanctions?
Well, I don't think so that William Hague and French foreign minister went to Burma because of competitions for oil and gas and others. What my impression that I have here is William Hague and the international community, they went there and then they delivered very clear message to the government of Burma. They said, will you change? If you have genuine change, and then we will consider lifting sanctions. And if you don't, and then we won't, and we will judge you by your actions. And that is what Hillary Clinton also said. So I think this approach is very practical, pragmatic, and I really support this. And I think other countries should also consider this kind of approach as well.
We have Another reaction to everything that's going on our Facebook page, Adabong says, nothing's going on. The only thing I can read from this is the fact that we over here in Europe and the Yankees, the Americans, now seem to be learning the lessons of engaged diplomacy, thereby shading away from the rhetoric of preaching democracy to people who don't listen. That's another reaction. There's another point I want to touch on, and that David Cameron mentioned in passing, which is the opposition. For everybody in the West, it's one figurehead that everybody knows, and that's Aung San Suu Kyi. David Cameron was saying it's a lot more complicated than that. Aung San Suu Kyi saying, making overtures that perhaps she would enter some kind of a national unity government or take part in the political process down the road. How do you think she's handled it?
Well, I think she's handled it pretty well. I don't see any other high-level politician handling such a complex and difficult situation the way she did. It's been very difficult to enter into dialogue with a regime that has for so long been closed, and she has been on a very thin line trying to maneuver and stay focused on her objectives while still being very pragmatic on the way she can convince the government to go along with her objectives. So I think she's handled it really well.
The support the international community has given to Aung San Suu Kyi has been very important, but it's been a double-edged sword. We've got to look at what depth is there behind the opposition. We have a lot of very old people and a younger generation who don't necessarily agree. And Burma's great need. Burma is potentially a rich country. It was far richer than Thailand, before the Second World War. It was one of the most profitable of all of Britain's colonies. It was the rice bowl of Asia. And it has enormous natural resources. The Burmese, as I see it, greatest need is the development of capacity to govern a modern, hopefully democratized economy and society. And this is, I think, where the international community should be putting a great stress, is capacity building. One of the multiple tragedies of Burma has been generations of young people have been sacrificed. The university has been closed, they've been repressed, they have not received an education. And this is a tragedy which we really have to deal with for the long term.
All right, so helping Burma is only beginning if you want to do it right. I want to thank you, David Cameron, for joining us. I want to thank Marie Battini and Zoya Fan for being with us from London, and we want to thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Stay with us. Next, it's Business. That's hosted by Marcus Carlson.